Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzar-Ramosi-Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lost Signals Reviews Film and Television. I've been thinking about ending this podcast for a very long time. Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Scott Villa.
Just a ghost of myself.
Christopher Morgan.
Good evening.
And Stephen Ramosi.
How you doing?
And we are doing the Netflix distributed Charlie Kaufman joint I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So, Scott, I believe you had a log line for us.
So I'll just come up with, old man, take a look at my life. I'm a lot like you are because it is my life.
It's pretty good.
All right, I'm going to go over the plot for this. A young couple is driving to visit the farmhouse of the young man's parents. A snowstorm is approaching, and it quickly devolves into a timid Lynchian nightmare, or an Andy Kaufman joke on the viewers of this, as they deal with weird time, body, basically temporal aspects and all this, and ends up as musical.
Sure.
Yeah. So I enjoy movies that play around with our preconceptions. I fear this one might have been a bit too obscure for me. And one of the problems with this is that as I was watching it, there's a mystery involved, what is occurring during this film. And I kept coming up with theories on what was happening. And and I did predict the ending to this, and it was one of the more mediocre theories I had come up with. I saw there's an infinite potential of what this movie could have been, and it didn't live up to what I thought it could have been. And I don't know, there's something about this that didn't maybe sit right with me. So I'm going to probably give it a 2 for a well-crafted movie that kind of, I felt, didn't stick the landing.
I mean, I would mostly agree. I enjoyed it enough. So, yeah, I think 2's about right. And I think my angle is going to be that I enjoy Charlie Kaufman works like quite a bit, like for the most part, overall. I feel like this one's like middle of the road for me in terms of that, even if just by that measurement. And maybe it was like a little too self-indulgent for its own good, but it was still perfectly fine. Like it didn't go off the rails too much, or like, to a degree, which I would say like ruined it. So yeah, like I think I'm going to stick with a solid 2 as well overall. And maybe like the point I'm taking off here might be further fleshed out in further questions, but for plot, that's what I'm looking at. So
it's interesting. I feel like Chris and I are going to somewhat disagree with you here, just based on Chris's. I don't know much about what Chris thought about this movie, but I know that he enjoyed it quite a bit, and I know that I love this movie. It's my favorite movie of the year so far. What I really like about this movie, and I get how you could see it as coming off as self-indulgent, I guess, and to a degree, it is almost like here's the thing. Charlie Kaufman movies are always going to be very personal to him.
Yeah. Sure.
You watch any Charlie Kaufman movie, you know that there's going to be a lot of personal stuff that he talks about. This movie, what I really, really, really love about it is it takes this very like out of place, out of time look at a man's life and his own thoughts and remembrances about it, and he's trying to fit the puzzle pieces in a way that will make him, as he's coming to the end of his life and as he eventually, dies at the end, he's trying to fit his life in with his own thoughts of his own intelligence, right? Like he clearly thinks that he is smart, but he has a lot of doubt, and that comes through a lot throughout this movie about himself. The story is about a guy who ends up being a janitor at a school at the end of his life, but he has such knowledge of like literature and movies and a lot of knowledge about plays, which comes out like, musical theater for the most part, which comes out and in his love of Oklahoma, which it has a lot of reference, but there's so many, like, there's all these references. Like it makes me feel kind of the way I feel about certain ways I feel about my own thoughts about myself, right? Like, or like I have a lot of reference points, and like there's parts of this movie where it's said like, I forget, there's a quote that goes something like the most rare thing is for someone to have an original thought or something like that. And like the next phrase that comes out, and I believe the young woman, right, the titular, or not titular, but the young woman that is in this movie, played by Jessie Buckley, the line after that was a quote by Thoreau, I think it was, or something. So like, it's all about the struggle to kind of know yourself. And I guess that goes into themes, right? But like, I think that in terms of plot for this movie, I love the way that the reveal is budgeted out throughout the movie. I think I'm going to give this a 3 for plot, just because I really enjoy the slow reveal. And honestly, you can watch this whole movie and not really realize what's happening. So like, Ian, you were saying you got it fairly early. Like
about when they went into the washing machine and pulled out the janitor uniform, I didn't realize that the woman herself was a amalgamation of all the women I think he loved throughout his life, and probably a little bit of his mother in there, or even like a part of himself, like the person that he wanted to love, right? Like the ideal version of that, but also all the self-doubt that comes through that as well. But about that point, I kind of like, we're going with the Raging Bull plot line here of a retrospective on of a person who never lived up to their what they wanted to be, and they have their moment in the sun towards the end, but it's kind of on the stage and not living up to what they actually, not that
right
in the sun, but
right, and that like, that moment never happened either. Like that was so that speech that he says at the end, you guys recognize it? It was pulled directly from A Beautiful Mind. Yeah. So like that speech was pulled directly from A Beautiful Mind. Again, another thing that he like plagiarizes and references. So like, I don't know. I think that this movie does so much in terms of like, not only having its own thing to say, but like having all these like great references to previous things, which I think, in terms of, and knowing you guys, I know that we all love a good reference. I see a lot of myself in something like this, where it's like, oh yeah, I kind of try to like reference something when I have a moment, like I try to pull a good reference because I think that's good. Like that's kind of a lot of what memes are about. Like it's kind of a lot of what society does a lot, especially at this moment. And I think it's talking about that, and it's talking about like what is a life at the end of the day, and all those things. So I don't know. I really loved it. I'm going to stop talking now because I've been talking for a long time. But
it spoke to you, so it seems.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I'm going to say is probably going to tie into themes, and I'm glad I have it next. I'm going to start off by saying I agree with Steve-O. I'm giving this a 3. I think it was incredibly well constructed. It is definitely a movie. Just going back and trying to reconstruct it to get other things, I almost immediately started rewatching this. I kind of had an idea what was going on. It was just a matter of how it was going to be explained, if that makes sense. I knew right away that the janitor was Jake grown up. So
Right.
how did he get here? And what were all the, how was his journey constructed? When you meet his parents, obviously they may or may not be their parents. Maybe they were them older and the merge didn't work out and he ended up alone. There's a bunch of different routes he can take. And then there's the
More interesting story, I'm going to argue.
but I'm also going to say that I also liked when they're in the car because there was like a Twilight Zone aspect of it. But what I really, what got me at the end was it's been a really shitty week. So I'm going to get probably this movie kind of hit pretty hard. From the dancing point on, I was basically done. I basically melted into my couch. There is a quote by Michael Caine who said, "I rather regret a bunch of things I did rather than one thing I didn't do." And this man is looking back in his life, in regret. And, all of us have, our writers and, you create a narrative in your head and you're always editing it. And when you look back in your own life, I don't know about you guys, but me sometimes, I always say that, I feel like my life began at 34 because I never felt like my life was my own before then. And, I always, you kind of reconstruct your own narrative. What if I made a right and made a left? How would I end up with everything I have now, plus those 34 years being something else? So rewriting your narrative, I got right, was pretty quick. I thought they did an excellent job with Jake being frustrated. All the little things that, like the color of her jacket, their backstory, her name, how they met, and the frustration he felt when he couldn't get the narrative right. I understand. I empathize with him. Yeah, it is a personal film. All the stars aligned right for me. It had a little bit of everything that I loved in it, but also there was an aspect that reminded me of the ending of 2001, where Bowman ends up with the aliens or however you want, and he looks at himself as a young man, and every time he turns a corner or looks in the other room, he's older. So when Jesse Plemons was, had his older parents, taking care of his mom, and so forth, I got a real sense of, were you looking back? Were you looking at, obviously I felt like he was looking, back on his life. I just didn't know how the pieces connected. And it is, I guess, it is a personal film, depending upon, what you take out of it. There's the aesthetic parts of it, which I like. I mean, I'm a sucker for two people driving down a road and one of them's thinking, I know where I'm going. The other one goes, I have to get back tomorrow. That's a Twilight Zone setup. All the things really came into focus for me personally, as somebody who, as I said before, likes to rewrite his own narrative, which I think goes into themes to a certain degree, because this film is not quite just about regret. It's about second guessing yourself and the complexity in which it's I'm going to reference Star Trek. There's an episode called Tapestry, and Picard learns that if you remove one fiber, it could irreparably change the present, who you are as a person. And watching Jake's progress throughout this, it was interesting as he created the narrative to see whether he was more of a proactive, reactive, content, frustrated. It was just a matter of watching him play with the pieces of his life. So I thematically and narratively, I don't want to say it's totally about regret, but it's about, deconstructing and reconstructing one's life. There's elements of regret within it. But and this might just be my own personal bias. And, this week I've been doing a lot of reflecting. So I said thematically and narratively, this film struck a chord. Being objective, I look back on it as it was constructed. Was it an effective narrative? Is it just me projecting myself onto it? So I'm giving it a very strong 3, and I'm giving themes a very strong 1. And I hope it made sense. I was doing a very hard time trying.
You did a very good job on that. Does anyone else want to go next in themes, since Chris kind of already addressed his angle on?
I'll go next briefly because, like you said, it struck home with you, and I get that. So while I may not personally feel that to the degree, what I do feel is if it's like I said, it's a little bit more self-indulgent, and opaque is a word that was used in the review that we checked out. So I'm not sure, because you're right, Chris. It isn't it flirts with the idea and the theme of regret, but isn't that isn't all encompassing as its core focus either. So I'm not sure though. I guess just for me, it was pulled off well enough for me to give it credit. Well, I maybe see what Kaufman was going for, and it came through sometimes via the narrative and via the characters. I just don't know if it's enough for me to give it a 1. So I'm looking at a softer 0 for themes specifically because of that, but I'm open to be convinced, so do so now. If you got something.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the themes of this were very strong. To be honest, I look at this as a movie that talks about, in a general sense, it talks about going back into your life, exploring parts of your life that you wish were different, and thinking about ways that they could have been different. Obviously, that's why Jake, keep calling him by the actor's name. Jake, even as an old man, is when he's thinking about what he could have been, played by Jesse Plemons as opposed to Guy Boyd, right? So Guy Boyd plays the real character. Jesse Plemons plays him in his own mind. Even when he's accepting the award and singing the song about a field mouse and nibbling on a broom at the end, he is, he's not himself. He's not played by the character who is him. That's because that's who he is in his mind. That's the life that he wanted. That's the life that he hoped for. And it's a life that came straight out of movies, which is a really, kind of a sad theme of this whole thing, is he wants the life that he has been reading about and watching and seeing through all the media that he consumes throughout his life, and he isn't that. There's this discussion about his mother, played, I think, awesomely by Toni Collette, says that he won this pin in grade school and he wore it for every day that week. And he says, no, I didn't. It was an Also Ran award, right? He looks back on his life and sees a lifetime of, these regrets that he has, even as the person that is his ideal person that he wants to be in his memory. He, as that person, is looking back with regret on his life. And even I think this is perhaps the most brilliant part of this, is he has this idealized woman that he's created who is thinking about ending things, right? She is he, in his own mind, he can't, at the end of his life, can't forgive himself enough to invent a person that actually loves him, right? He sees this woman and he's why would she stay with me? I don't understand this. And that's such a super strong theme of this movie. And I love all of their back and forth. You see that there's chemistry between these two imagined characters, right? But you can also see at the same time why she's thinking about ending things. He has these moments of weird, like aggressive anger. He has these moments of like just pure self-doubt and self-hatred. And that's all like his own mind coming throughout the movie. I think themes is the absolute strongest part of this movie, perhaps other than style. I really love what's going on with what Charlie Kaufman's saying. And like, you know, me, I love Charlie Kaufman scripts, perhaps almost to a fault, but like, I think this is one of his stronger ones. I probably put this on the same level as I loved Adaptation. I probably put this on the same level as Adaptation, or perhaps even a little bit better. I think that this script is really great. And I will say this, I think it not only deserves, but like warrants multiple watchings, because I think you will get more every single time you watch this movie. I've watched it twice now, and it got better the second time I watched it, I would say. So, you know, that said, I know you guys have seen it once, but I love the themes of this, so I'll let you go.
So I think this says a lot about you. This is your favorite movie, and my favorite movie of the year so far was Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, because I really enjoy the rawness of what I view as unfiltered truth in cinema. And artistry can be done to elevate pain, or it can be done to if art is an engaging in intimacy, you can hide behind art for fear of being rejected for your art, or you can use artistry to elevate it. And I feel that this was hiding behind its art. It was obscuring it in order. It was obscuring the intimacy. It was I feel, an act, like Jake himself, an act of cowardice in life. It's not my type of movies. I think that it's hiding the raw emotion, where I like just laying it bare on the screen. So this isn't my type. And I think I give an example just now of the film that did hit like for this year. So I'm going to give it a 0 for the themes.
One other thing I want to say, Beth brought this to my attention too, was I'm thinking of ending things, you know, I'm thinking of ending things with Jake. It's him contemplating suicide the entire time. I just brought that up because I meant to mention it and I didn't. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so before we go on, I don't want to say too much about this, but I don't agree that I think it's obscuring his emotion in this. I think it's laid pretty bare in this movie. But I mean, obviously that goes to how you view it. And yeah, exactly.
Work for you, didn't work for me.
I think he wants to be laid bare, I guess, but at the end of the day, mine also is like, yeah, it's just a little bit. It's in Steve. I like Kaufman, you know, like quite a bit. I just think in this instance, it wasn't quite up to snuff from what I guess I was expecting and what the setup was. And in retrospect, like having, you know, and now analyzing it like after having seen it all back to front. So like, I don't know, because I don't necessarily want to give it a 0, but it's not bereft of themes, nor they were ill handled, I suppose. But because it sort of has this haze of, I don't want to say cowardice either, although I see what you meant by that. It's just obscure enough that I think it doesn't work for me. It works for me less than it does work. So I'm going to still stick with a soft 0, but it's a fine razor's edge for it in this question specifically, knowing the artist.
All right, well, Scott, keep talking about Antagonist.
So I think this one, maybe now, I was unsure of this one coming into it, but now that talking out plot and themes, I think I'm looking at actually a decent one, because it's, you know, mulling over your regrets, like, you know, as you guys mentioned, looking back upon your life and seeing what could have been, what should have been, what you know, how you saw yourself and how you thought others saw you at the time and throughout your entire existence, and now coming to a lonely-ish end, more or less. So I think that works. Like, I'm still in some from you. Like, it's a very down to earth, like very real, personal story, right? Slice of life kind of thing. And I think actually that does work because I feel like he antagonizes himself with you, if you will, like via his own, his reflections upon his life and where he ended up. So I think it actually is actually very effective, and I'm going to give it a pretty solid 1 because of that.
Yeah, I was actually wavering on this to begin with, Steve. You actually gave a very where it didn't work with themes. I actually did feel that he was thoroughly antagonized by himself throughout all of it. So I'm going to give it a 1 as well.
Yeah, of course. It's no surprise to him. He is his own worst enemy, right? But like,
You got with that log line.
yeah, damn it. But it's a really interesting thing because each one of these characters who are his own imaginings of people that he created or people that he actually knew, like his mother, his imaginings of his mother and father, and like, I guess I should have said this in themes, but like him trying to place them in the timeline with his girlfriend, right? Like, where does she fit in this timeline if I made her up and like put her in here? And his girlfriend and himself, even it's really interesting seeing himself, his, imagined younger self, Jake, as his own antagonist because he can't seem to get things right. I loved like every moment where the parents, his imagined parents ask a question and then he's trying to figure it out. So she takes a minute to like answer or whatever until like he comes up with something. It's really interesting seeing like his own self-deprecating moments, his own like moments of self-congratulation, his own moments of stuff like this. And like, he really is struggling with his own view of himself. And you can see that like it comes, I feel like it comes in really hard, like his own antagonism towards himself, his own self-doubt comes in really well. And I'm going to give it a strong 1 for that.
To just build off of what you said for a second, there's one scene where they're showing the parents in their latter years. The father's going through dementia. Tony Collette is very frail. And he's sitting, and all he wants is someone to congratulate him for being a good son.
Yeah.
And like they're like, no, you sacrificed a portion of your adulthood to take care of your parents. Like, why won't anyone recognize that as good? And when he imagines getting the kiss from the woman, like it's completely tragic.
It's so relatable, right? Like that happens so much. And yeah, absolutely. Anyway,
it's funny because I feel like I'm referencing other things, but the thing is, it's kind of like his mind palace because the young woman whose name keeps changing, let's call her Lucy,
or Ames,
is talking to her mother when Tony Collette is in like the 1950s housewife thing, and she's like, Jake told me not to go in the basement, and the mother's like, well, live dangerously, sweetie. And that's when she goes down to the laundry room and sees the work uniforms, and then goes into the room where all the paintings that he had shown, that his imaginary girlfriend had shown his mom, were on the walls, and his actual paintings were on the floor, and they say Jake, and they were just as beautiful. And it's kind of like it spoke so much about, to the level of self-deprecation, that here's his dream woman to come home to impress his parents, and the pictures that she gives his girlfriend to show his mom aren't even his. It's like he sidelined himself in favor of this idealistic woman. Meanwhile, I mean, the whole movie is basically him contemplating suicide and reconstructing the narrative of his life. I mean, I just thought stuff like that, is what really, is just the layers of this film. Just phenomenal. I'm giving it a 1.
All right, this one's all around. Steven, talk about Jake, or the protagonist.
So meet the protagonist, same as the antagonist, right? Like, yeah. I mean, it's Jake, and it's the movie's a lot about him forgiving himself for not living up to his own expectations, right? Like, it's a lot about him trying to, or not, in a lot of ways. Like, it's a lot about him trying to come to terms with his life, right? It's a person, and like that, you know. You're never going to get an easy answer in a Charlie Kaufman movie. That's not what you go into them for. And you don't get one in this. Like, it's a person is a person. Like, you don't have a happy ending. You have an ending that suits your life and is tailored towards your life. And I really love the way that this is played by, I mean, I guess to some degree it's Jake, it's the young woman, right? And I guess mostly the janitor, who is the actual person, who is the protagonist, who you're seeing his life through the lens of all these different people. And I really kind of love the how much you get to know him through the, I don't know, 75 seconds of screen time that he has or whatever. Like, but it's like this movie is all about this person that's almost never on screen. And like, you understand his life. You understand a lot about him based on his inner life. Not, you don't actually get to, like, it's interesting. You don't get to see like what really he's all about. You see him a couple times, like mopping the halls and like doing stuff like that. But what you really don't know from looking at that stuff is the rich and also like completely neurotic inner life that he has. And I think it's a super strong protagonist. I think it's very well fleshed out, especially since he has literally, even though he's rarely on screen, he has the entire movie to talk about himself, you know? And you get this whole understanding of the arc of a character's life from basically beginning to end based on like the stories that he tells. And even it's starting with the stories that he tells about like his childhood and ending with, kind of seeing his life with his parents and then going through and like living without them and seeing what that's like as the janitor of the school. So you get a very strong arc, I think, of his life. And I think I'm going to give it a very strong one.
Yeah. Oh, go on. No, Ian, please.
Speaking of fleshed out, I wonder who found the old man's dead body naked in the school. But no, overall, I agree with you on that. He is a very, through all of the, in a sense, metaphysical vignettes, he's well drawn out.
No, I was. It's really funny. I'm going to get maudlin today, because that's atypical for me. I used to always be afraid of like growing old alone, and then when I became 35, my fish died, and I was distraught because this little beta I got from my cousin's wedding that was a centerpiece. I don't know why, but I decided at 35 I wanted to have nothing to lose. I didn't want to get married. I didn't want any more pets. I didn't want a house. I knew pretty much 99.9% I didn't want kids. That was never a thing. So now I have all that.
One of those is still true.
I don't have kids, thankfully. No offense to anybody who does. I mean, I'm all for good people reproducing, but this is a really interesting look at somebody, from somebody who did want more and looking back. I mean, it's just, I mean, like I said, this film, the more we talk about it, the more I'm having a hard time talking about it because it really did hit a chord with me. And it did have a one of those things where, he did come to peace with himself, but looking back, it's just like, even when you have nothing physical in your life that you're afraid of losing, you're not afraid of your house burning down, you're not afraid of your wife or your dog dying or it's just amazing. Like, when you don't have anything physically to lose, how much you still have to lose. Like, there is still so much loss to be had. And I think he's a really great protagonist. Again, the actual physical person had like 75 seconds of screen time, maybe just a little more. But this was a really great look back. And that's why I say it can't be about regret, because, you just about regret because you have somebody who's experiencing loss for stuff he never had. And it's kind of a unique, the fact that he finds peace, and the fact that this film could have gone with in a very nihilistic direction, and I don't think it did. So I'm definitely giving him a very strong one.
No, that's fair. No, I don't a lot ahead, but I think I do agree that I'll say this, like, for me, it was almost a slower, because at least based on the trailer, I thought it was going to be the young woman's like point of view, like her story. So like for the first maybe half hour, like it almost kind of is that, but then after that, and you quickly realize like that isn't the case. So like I think he pulled a good slow roll on me in terms of that. And then once it was clear that it was Jesse, like slash Jake, Jesse the actor playing Jake, and his story, and yes, the basically the actual character was the old janitor, the man who played that. So like, yeah, I think it works both ways as a reflection, as you guys said, as a sort of look back upon a life lived and not lived in certain cases. And I think it works, and I'm going to give it a pretty solid 1.
All right, well, I'm on to supporting characters. 2 I'm going to mention. Toni Collette is always a win.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoy it. She plays
right on
the great mom in psychological horrors, but also the dad actually was the character that spoke the most to me throughout this, especially when he's going like, yeah, I see your art here. I prefer like having people in my art, like, so I can get at. And it's almost like I'm Charlie Kaufman's father here critiquing his. I prefer simpler movies where you actually have. So yeah, I good job in having a character I can relate to in this. But so I'm going to give it a 1.
Yeah, I mean, again, Toni Collette always is almost like unequivocally going to be a 1 no matter what she's in, especially when she's supporting. And I like David Duos quite a bit, and like, yeah, I think they made a good couple in the various iterations and so forth. Like as you said, Chris, like instances of when they were like a little bit younger, when they're getting older and getting a little bit out of it, if you will. But I think they did a good job either way, and I guess maybe even certainly they're the most important and more focused on supporting characters. But there's a couple other ones like the 3 girls at the ice cream stand and like things like that. But for the most part, certainly it's Toni and David, and I will give them a lot of credit, and I will give them a 1.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm going to agree with you guys there. I think that they both do great jobs. Toni Collette, you can't go wrong. David Thewlis does an amazing job keeping up with her and, being on the same level. And you're right. Like I was going to mention the 3 girls at the ice cream stand. There's an interesting little like stop off in like philosophical, I don't even know the word I'm trying to say, but like, they have this little like conversation where it's like, you don't have to go forward. You can just stay where you are. But as it turns out, you do have to go forward. And like, there's kind of that aspect to that there. I think that's an interesting dynamic. Obviously the one girl who she actually talks to is probably more important than the other 2 who don't really have much to do but be like a thorn in the psyche of Jake, but yeah, I think and you've got all the high school students who are an old face at the last scene who were like the students from the play. It's actually interesting. So like all those people in the last scene where he's giving the speech are all the students of the high school who you had seen
I
earlier
noticed that. Yeah, yeah.
in other things, but like
It's finally gave him respect.
yeah, exactly. So it's like those are the people that he knows, right? That's who's going into his memories. They just look older now. So I thought that was a nice little touch. So yeah, I'm gonna give supporting one.
I'm gonna say one thing since we're on the subject that I was gonna bring up in style, but I don't want to forget about it. At the ending where all the students in the thing, I love the fact that everybody's in high school theater makeup.
Yeah.
It's really strong. It's very strongly drawn because at first I'm like, wait, what the fuck is going on? And then
Super obvious that they're in old face, right?
like, oh yeah, I remember this from when I was in high school plays. Like, okay, let's put these wrinkles here because you had these really bright stage lights on you and still didn't even look good from the audience. But I agree with everything you guys said. I'm just gonna mention the I got to get their names. The male and female in the Robert Zemeckis film within the film that he's
Yeah.
Yvonne and I don't remember what the guy's name was, but Yvonne's boyfriend, I think, is the
Yep, that's right. Yvonne's boyfriend. I thought that was really cool. I thought that it really was like a left turn, and that the thing closed. It's like directed by Robert Zemeckis. I'm like, that's pretty fucking sweet.
It was a good slow roll. Yeah, you're right, Chris.
Yvonne played by, I have to mention, Colby Minifie, who has been in a bunch of stuff lately, and I think you're going to see her a bunch going forward. But
yeah,
But we haven't mentioned the woman though yet.
I found her. I thought she was a protagonist. I put her in protagonist
because she's a part of Jake's subconscious.
Yeah,
in a sense.
Right. She's a manifestation of his psyche.
Yeah, mostly in the same boat. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was also going to say, like,
I didn't say that specifically. Yes, agreed. Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, nothing. I mean, as far as avatars go, I'm also going to bring up the dancers at the end because Yvonne and Yvonne's boyfriend were his avatars. Whether or not it was the film he was actually watching or an imagined film or whatever. But at the end with the dancers, the dance was just absolutely. I mean, that might go to style, but I have to give credit for the three dancers there because they were fucking phenomenal.
It should go to style, but that was incredible. And also, Yvonne shows up as the young woman at one point.
Yes.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. You're right. Yep, good call.
All right, Chris, continue talking about the dialogue.
This is really funny because as with supporting characters, without the dialogue, whether it's keeping pace, whether it's giving an indication as to where he is in the psyche, all the dialogue worked for me. I think we've all, at one point or another, quoted or paraphrased something from the dialogue, but the dialogue was as integral to the story as anything else. Like I said, and also is something there's a precedent for was the nonverbal cues, was how things were delivered. Like the raspberries were just, I fucking loved the raspberry she had, and then they were going to it's like the space filler when you've got no answer for anything, and whether you openly or in your mind go, it's just something about when they do that just really, to me, says so much. So many of the dialogue won, very strong one, because again, it is one more part of the texture of this film. And there's a lot of nonverbal cues that went along with the verbal cues. I don't really have much more to say about it than that.
Good.
I was going to say, I completely love the dialogue of this movie. Obviously, if it wasn't obvious before, there are those moments where both of these characters, well, mostly the young woman, like, embodies an entirely different person. I think that the actress Jessie Buckley does an amazing job at that. There's exactly what you're talking about, the moment where she like first does the raspberry, and then she's talking about what was the movie that she's talking about? Secret of a Woman or something.
Don't remember it offhand.
But she goes into. Sorry, Chris, gone.
Women Under the Influence.
Under the Influence, yeah. And by Cassavetes, right? And like she goes into this full like reviewer voice. She has like takes on a completely different voice and like goes into a whole. She basically just word for word says an entire review of the movie, with his interventions from time to time, and then she like rebukes him and then like goes back into it. I love that. I think that it's so interesting seeing his own, like, and knowing that this is all one person having this conversation in his own head, and giving himself a moment, or like the moment where he says like, "Baby, it's cold outside," and she's like, "I can't believe you just quoted rape song to me," and then he has like, you know, seeing it on the screen, it's two people, but like this is an entire conversation within his head where he's like trying to like say like, "Oh no, it's not that bad," and then it's like, "Oh yes, it is because of this and this and this and this," and then he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I see that now, okay," and like yeah, there are so many moments like that in this movie where there are these great back and forths, like just these turns of phrases, and like, you know, you see that like him getting mad at himself for like going down this one line of reasoning, or like trying to cut himself. Like I love all the times where he cuts himself off. He's like, ta-da, and now we're here. Like as they like magically show up at a place when he wants to stop the line of conversation or whatever. I think that the script of this is really, really well done in terms of that. And yeah, obviously I'm giving it 1.
It's, to me, clever enough. It may not be always like holding its own, you know, keeping itself afloat, but I do like the idea of like, you know, having conversations essentially with himself, but as personified by basically an amalgam of all the many relationships that he's had in the past. It's like that worked. And yeah, like it was funny, Steve-O, when like she flips almost like from talking about like let's say physics and then going to review of the movie and then of paintings and stuff, right? It's like that did work for me more than it didn't, even though I don't think I was as enthralled with it as you guys might have been, but I do think it overall 80% or so worked for me. So enough of it did for a 1.
You said clever enough. I say almost too clever.
Sometimes for its own good, but it didn't always verge into that.
Yeah, like it oddly enough kind of swerves between those two extremes, but somehow it is entertaining to watch. If at times, a bit pretentious to watch, but
a bit self-indulgent.
Give it a 1,
but not too overly so.
By the way, I love it. Multiple points that, you know, if following the logic of the movie, he calls himself out for being like almost too clever, as you say, right? Like there are these moments where he's like,
that in itself is too clever.
Is it?
It's too meta clever.
Yeah.
Where you're like, but like
it's too cutesy.
You know, like that's the entire idea of like, oh, okay, I'm writing this thing. Oh, you gotta stop trying to be so smart, or like stop trying to be so clever.
Right, but when you put that into your movie, that automatically makes, you know what I mean?
It's excusing.
It's not excusing it. It's telling you what the
throw a David Foster Wallace reference along with an Anna Karina reference. Oh, but I don't want to be. I'm being too intelligent here. Like that is. I'm sorry. It's
I mean, yeah, sure, but I don't know.
I'm in the middle of you both of you gentlemen. I see what.
Would you say the same about David Foster Wallace?
Yes, probably.
I hate David Foster Wallace.
You hate him?
I despise reading him.
I don't hate him nor despise writing, but I do think he sometimes also tries to get too clever for his own good. So that's all. If you're asking me specifically about that, but anyway.
But do you give it a 1 though?
Yes, I do.
You almost convinced me to give it a 0, but my instinct says
by my love of it.
All right, Scott, you're on to style.
So I mean, I'm looking at a solid 1 coming into it. It's Kaufman. He's always been, if nothing else, you expect his visuals to be very good, and I think that is the case here. I think some of the shots, I guess I want to say like they're a bit sparser, like more minimalist than versus some of his previous works, but I think that works within the framework of what he's going for within this one. So yeah, like I really have no complaints. I think like one of you, Chris, you mentioned like the dancing part in the high school hallway, like that was a pretty standout moment, and just like the moment to moment stuff itself also worked quite a bit. So I really have no complaints, and I guess I'll save the soundtrack for you guys to delve into more, but I think that worked for me as well decently. So overall, style to me might be my favorite aspect of this film, and I'm definitely giving it a 1. So
The thing I liked about the style of this film, I mean, again, it clicked all the boxes. It had all the aesthetics I love from like a Twilight Zone episode. It was very intimate in a lot of ways, but it would not take a lot of editing to turn this into a stage play. And I really appreciated that about it. I wouldn't want to be backstage having to change the actors' costumes and wigs and so forth as they walked on. But the thing I loved about it was the fact that this could very well have been like the part in the car. It would have been very easy to kind of go with the stage play aesthetic and not do the ice in the windshield, windows and everything. But they did that. It was this great melding of theater and cinema. And both of them were done very intimately, which I love. I love that aesthetic. So I'm definitely giving it a strong one.
All right. Yeah, I think that this is a masterclass in genre melding, which I think also fits into the plot and the themes of it. I love the way that Kaufman is always thinking about what is the appropriate way to set this scene, dress this scene, what is this scene about, and that's how we're going to film it, and that's what it's going to be. You know, it's a very like cold dynamic when they're in the car because they're in the middle of a blizzard. You know, like it's a very there's a lot of movement when they're filming the dance scene because there's a lot of movement in that scene. Scott, I know you briefly mentioned the score and the music. I thought was terrific throughout.
It worked and melded well. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been in my head. I can't get the fucking song from Oklahoma that he sings at the end of the movie out of my freaking head last 3 days. But yeah, I think that the style works for me in a big way in this movie, and I'm going to give it a 1.
I can't claim the style is not unimpressive. I'm going to give it a 1, but I just want to say that I actually think one of the problems with this is actually the trailer. I think the trailer sold this as a different movie than it was, and my expectations were completely different going in. So perhaps if I had not seen the trailer to this, I would have had a different viewpoint from it. But it's just I didn't know where else to fit that in. So I think
like maybe it's
I agree 100% on the trailer. The trailer,
right? It was a bit of a not like a bait and switch or something, but like it just wasn't what this trailer set it up to be. Not that I was disappointed with it, even so, but I guess the editing on the trailer could have been a little more clear or something. Like I don't know. But yeah, I do agree with that point.
All right, so Stephen, would you like to round this out with your recommendation?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I recommend it. I think that this is up there in Charlie Kaufman's au revoir, and to use a fancy word, as they do quite a bit in this movie.
That Jake might use.
Yeah. And I think that it's worth a watch. I really enjoyed it. It was not I didn't think there was a wasted moment in it. I know that not everyone would agree with me on that point, but I loved watching the entire thing, and so much so that I watched it twice already. So yeah, go check it out.
I agree with Steve-O. I love this film. As I said before, I went back, scrolled through the thing, trying to find all the little cues like the coat and so forth, and I almost ended up rewatching it. If it weren't for Beth saying, hey, look, I want to see it now, let's watch it again, I probably would have very much rewatched it. But I also want to say something that's been slightly off topic. There are 4 films that I can remember from this year that were released this year.
This is one of them?
Gretel and Hansel. Yeah, obviously this one's going to stick with Honey Boy. I'm always going to screw this up. Always, sometimes.
Never, rarely, always, sometimes.
Never, rarely, sometimes, always.
And this one, I don't know if there's 4 better films this year. If there's any film that I'm leaving out, let me know. but I'm gonna say this.
Pretty much anything is better than Gretel and Hansel.
I love Gretel.
I know.
But,
Take it easy, boys.
no, but my whole point is, I think in a year of where there's no theaters open, where something like Tenet, who I don't want to see that movie on principle because I'm so sick of hearing Nolan whine about it. I think that we've found, at least in my 4, maybe the 3 of us will say, some really great little gems this year. So,
What am I giving it right now?
A 7 before recommendation.
Okay.
So if you recommend it, it's an 8, not a 7.
So like I'm a little bit unsure of it because it's not a bad movie, but maybe I'm viewing it like versus, like I said previously, other Kaufman works. I'm not sure if I would. Like I would probably tell you to see Eternal Sunshine and/or Adaptation before I would recommend this one. And just in general, like again, I feel like you sort of like have to be a little bit more of a Kaufman-ish person in a sense to watch it and sit down and enjoy it. Otherwise, you might be bored or you might be like, I didn't get it. And like, I understand that. So I might end up with a soft 0. Like, not that it's bad. It's just that I recommend it less than I would largely recommend it at this point. So that's probably my reasoning and why I'm going to give it a softer 0. Yes, sir.
Fair enough. Really quick before you go, Ian. Other movies that we've seen this year, Bill and Ted, and which I know you're not going to put on the list, but Palm Springs, which is pretty good,
I actually like Palm Springs more than this movie, to be honest.
and First Cow.
I keep forgetting about First Cow.
Although I think that technically came out in 2019.
I totally forgot about Palm Springs.
And The Five Bloods.
Oh, The Five Bloods. Okay, so
I
there's
recommend that over this film for sure.
yeah.
Yes, I'm going to go official 0 for recommend. Maybe softer, but that's it.
So I'm going to not recommend this. I'm going to recommend a movie in its place that I feel is similar in theme, except it handles it from the opposite direction. One of my favorite movies of all time is, I just blanking on it, Big Fish.
Yeah.
And that is also a retrospective of life, but it's a fictionalization of life too. But it's an optimistic film. It's about, instead of regretting what wasn't, it's elevating what your life is to a grander story, and finding out like the truths in the embellishments. And I think that's, I just, it's one of the most touching movies to me. And I feel it does handle a similar theme to this movie. But I just think a better metaphor. Anyway, so nonetheless, that's it. So the final scores. We have a very disparate one here.
Shit. All right.
There are 2 10s and 2 7s. 10s are, this is a perfect movie, and 7 mediocre, basically, because we said that.
It's not mediocre.
Not mediocre. Like,
It is a good movie.
Yeah.
So
Solid.
it's a passing grade.
Yeah, solid enough. Solid enough.
So we gave it a 7 because it was like it didn't connect thematically and plot-wise, and so we didn't recommend it. But overall, we agreed upon like style and dialogue and how fancy this film was.
What was that come out to average?
8.5.
And that's fine.
That's totally
Okay with that. So would you guys?
It's on IMDb. I think IMDb it's sitting at a 6.9. So
Okay.
But I also want to say there's one thing I forgot to say was I've not seen Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind, but this is like the first Kaufman film that I've actually liked the entirety of.
Okay.
Because as I said, 2/3 of the way into Malkovich, I'm like, all right, this film's overstaying its welcome. I kind of got bored with adaptation. So like the fact that like walking into this, that I'm actually going to say that not only am I recommending a Charlie Kaufman film, but is now contender for like the best film of the year.
Fair enough.
I
would recommend Total Sunshine over this film, but
I will see that.
therein lies a diff.
Well, we have finished with this episode tonight. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer here with Scott Thurlow.
Old man took a look at my life.
Christopher Morgan.
Have a good night.
Stephen Rossi.
Somebody has to be a pig infested by maggots.
And with that, thanks for joining us. Cheers. See you next time.
Editing and engineering by Jonathan Ian Manzer. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or
moths?